right, so like Sarah mentioned, thank y'all for being here today. My name is Rachel Hunter. I'm excited that all of you are here and wanting to learn more about how we set up our co-requisite courses at the College of Charleston. So like she mentioned, I teach at the College of Charleston and I'm here in Charleston and would love to connect with any of you if y'all are here. I'm going to share my email at the end and y'all, I would love to hear from some of y'all if you're interested to learn more. But let's go ahead and jump right in. So why did we choose this co-requisite model? So many of us were seeing students at our institution at least coming in underprepared for our college level math courses. College algebra at our institution is actually already a prerequisite course for either pre-calculus or business calculus. And so we were seeing students come in even underprepared for college algebra. And we felt like, what should we do with these students? We didn't want to have to send them to, our local technical college to take classes there and then come over to campus. We felt like that's kind of a daunting thing to tell one of our new students, you have to take several classes at another college and then you can come here. We didn't want to have to set up another prerequisite course where we're telling them they've got to take several classes before they're ready to take a class that actually counts towards their major. So we looked into this idea of a co-requisite model. Basically, that means that students are taking a course concurrently with their college algebra course. And that course is designed just to support them in their college algebra work. We actually called our class College Algebra Support. We labeled it as Math 101S in our course listings. So our goal in doing that, one big goal would be that it'd be more time efficient for students because they could actually take instead of taking a prerequisite, they're taking a class concurrently that helps hopefully get them through that course, not just through it, but prepared to take their subsequent course. And it's also more cost efficient. So we set it up to just be a 1 credit hour course, which would hopefully save the students some money. And our goal was hopefully to lower the DFW rate in that college algebra course and see more students successfully make it through their college math sequence that they need for their major. We're also hoping to build some student confidence as well and see students, when we get their SAT or ACT scores or their placement scores and they're lower, it's not fun to tell a student that they have to go somewhere else to take a class. And instead we can tell them, we've got support for you right here and we're happy to help you through these courses. So a little information about how we set up the class. Like I mentioned, we made it just 1 credit hour. Our goal there was, or that students were only paying for 1 credit hour to keep it more cost efficient. And then that class was set up as a pass-fail class. The reason why we did that is it didn't affect students' GPA at all. So they either passed or failed college algebra report. And again, it wasn't weighted in their GPA. Even though they only paid for 1 credit hour, they were actually getting 3 contact hours per week. So they were getting 3 hours every week of extra guided instruction and support through this class. We set it up so that graduate assistants were teaching the class. I was actually the instructor of record, and then each section, which during fall of 2020 and spring of 21, we offered 5 sections of Math 101S. And there was 1 graduate assistant assigned to each section to teach the class. So students mainly worked with their graduate assistants. I was also there as a resource for them. I actually taught several sections of college algebra. So some of the students knew me as their teacher for college algebra and then also as their instructor of record for college algebra support, and they could use me as a resource either way. But the graduate assistants were doing a lot of the communicating with the students, a lot of the actual teaching with the students, and I was doing the behind the scenes, providing all of the worksheets, providing all of the grading rubrics, helping them work through specific student issues. We set it up so that there was approximately 20 students in each section. We wanted to keep these classes small so that that support would be, each student felt like they were getting supported well. It was important for us to stress to the students that this is not another math course. You're not going to have a lot of extra homework for this course. This course is just meant to provide you support. So what questions do you have? How can we help you? We did set up some worksheets where they have some problems that we wanted them to designate and work through, but we helped them work through that worksheet throughout the course. So it wasn't ever, here's a worksheet, do it tonight and turn it in tomorrow. It was, here's a worksheet that we're going to do together as a group and work through it. And you will eventually turn it in, but there's really no reason why you shouldn't finish it during class today. So again, in our goals, just provide additional support, provide them extra practice. Another big goal that we had was in that support system, we wanted students to feel very comfortable. I feel like sometimes the students who struggle are nervous or hesitant to ask a question because they feel like maybe it won't be a good question, or maybe I should already know that and I shouldn't be asking about it. So we wanted to be sure that our college algebra support was a comfortable environment. And I'll talk about ways that we tried to do that in just a minute. We also wanted to teach students, how do you study for a math class? How do you prepare for a math class? How do you prepare for a math test or a cumulative final exam? I feel like as well, a lot of these students who come in underprepared for a college level math course have really never figured out how to study, or figured out, when I'm stuck on factoring, I can't just forget about factoring and not learn it for this test because I'm going to need it for the rest of the semester. So how can we help these students learn about the resources that the college offers? There's free math tutoring that we tried to get them to all take advantage of and learn about, so that when they took future math courses, they would understand how to study, understand what they should do when they're confused about something, and hopefully be better prepared to take that class. So we started this at a hard time. We started during fall 2020, which we all know was during the pandemic, and we were fully online. So it wasn't the easiest time to start this new course, but we had already been planning on doing it that semester, so we ran with it. That added some extra hurdles because all of the graduate assistants had to learn to teach, not only teach for the first time, but also teach online for the first time. But I'm very proud of the work that they did. They worked super hard. But I first want to talk a little bit about what it looked like when we set up the course online, and then we'll go into what it's going to look like during this upcoming fall semester when we're in person, which I'm really excited about. So I've laid out here what a Monday, Wednesday, Friday course looked like. Basically, every Monday during that first 50-minute meeting, that was what we called the worksheet meeting. So students met with their graduate assistant via Zoom for that full 50 minutes. A worksheet was actually posted online for them before that class started. We usually had it up about a week before the class started to give them plenty of time to print it if they had access to a printer, or to download it to a tablet if they had access to that. If students didn't have that resource, then they were allowed to just write on a piece of paper and work out the problems that way as well. But during that 50 minutes, so this graduate assistant was going through the worksheet with the students. On the next slide, I actually want to show y'all an example of what these worksheets look like, and then we'll back up a little bit. So like, here's an example of one with exponent rules. So the graduate assistant would walk through all of these this first little box here, walk through all these different exponent rules, work through one example of each of these rules and let students see how those rules really work, and then explain why those rules work the way they do some simple examples to see that. And this would be a lot of the instruction teaching part. And then the graduate assistants would move down here to these practice problems, and each worksheet had 10 to 15 practice problems that they would try. And what we like for them to do is to really start out by saying, okay, here's practice problem number 1. I want y'all to all take a minute and look at it and think about, how would you try to start this problem? What make you look at it and say, how could I rewrite this, the directions say, using only positive exponents? How could I simplify here and write my final answer with only positive exponents? We liked to give the students a minute to think about it and try it. And then maybe we'd call on one student and say, hey, what stuck out to you? What would you like to try? Or how'd you try to start this problem? And I would say the problems, varied in difficulty here. Some of them got a little harder, and those ones, maybe the graduate assistant would walk through step by step by step instead of necessarily calling on someone to get them started and try to answer. We tried to give the students some kind of easier questions to answer to build their confidence. What do you notice here? What happens when you divide 10 by 5 or 10 by -5? You should get -2, something simple to walk them through that. So this is kind of what generally the worksheets look like. We also set up some test review worksheets. Those were just during testing weeks. And basically those worksheets just had about 15 problems from what was a practice test that students generally missed that I would pull out. And again, the graduate assistants would just walk through these problems step by step. Try to call on all 20 students throughout the course meeting, even if it's just a simple question like, hey, what did you do to both sides of this equation? And you should have added 2x over, or something simple that hopefully they would all know. But we tried to make a point of talking to every student during those worksheet meetings and being sure that they're all engaged, they had their cameras on, they were ready to talk. I'm sure some of you who taught online know that's not the easiest thing, but we did our best with that. So that's pretty much what Mondays looked like. That was our big instruction time, I would say, and time for students to work through a topic that we felt like was something that they generally struggled with in college algebra. So I pulled out topics that I felt like we should cover on those worksheets and provided all of those worksheets. One thing that the instructors or the graduate assistants sometimes used as well during those worksheet meetings would be breakout rooms. Sometimes they would say, okay, I'm going to let y'all work on problems 9 and 10 in a breakout room where there's 3 students in each room, and the graduate student would move around to each of those breakout rooms on Zoom and talk to them about what they were working on. So the goal was that the graduate assistants got through at least 90% of that worksheet during that worksheet meeting. Sometimes they finished the whole entire worksheet. Sometimes they would leave, 2 to 4 problems for the students to try on their own. And that was, in a sense, some homework for them to do. But what we did is we actually set up small groups, which I'll talk about in just a minute, and allowed them to work on those problems then if they needed help with them. But the worksheet was always done at the beginning of a week during a 50-minute session, and they had until Friday night to turn it in. Those worksheet meetings were also recorded, so students, if they missed a worksheet meeting, could watch them later. If they needed to rework something from the worksheet or had something come up during that worksheet meeting, they could rewatch it. But overall, I think students liked that instruction time. It was slower probably than what they were doing in their college algebra course. And it was also always, like I mentioned, a topic that we picked out as something that students generally struggle with during college algebra. So the rest of the week was spent doing small group meetings. So I mentioned there's about 20 students in each section. And what we did is we broke them into 4 small groups. And again, during the fall, these small groups were all online. During the spring, we actually gave students the option of doing small group in person because it was the smaller group and we could meet them on campus. We had about half of our students prefer that in-person small group, and those that did, I think, really got a lot out of it, which we were excited about. Basically, small group time was always a 25-minute meeting where they could rework problems from the worksheet that they struggled with, or rework problems from the worksheet that they didn't get to finish yet, or ask about a totally different topic from college algebra that they were struggling with, or ask about something from the test review or their previous tests that they didn't do well on and rework some of those problems. It was designed to be a smaller, more comfortable group, hopefully, that students could just ask whatever question that they had. So students were required to come to their one assigned small group, but they were allowed to come to as many small groups as they wanted. And we saw some students that would stay, for example, on Wednesday for the full 50 minutes and stay for 2 small groups and hear what questions the second group had, or come on Wednesday and on Friday. Especially during testing weeks, we saw some students coming to, all 4 small groups, which we were really excited about and really encouraged that. And actually did give them some incentives for that I'll talk about in just a minute. We did ask the graduate assistant, or I provided the graduate assistant with a few problems that they could always have in their back pocket to go over, just in case there was the awkward silence of nobody has a question, what do we want to do at this time? Okay, here's a problem. I noticed people were having trouble factoring when that leading coefficient isn't equal to 1. So let's work through these 3 problems on that topic. And we would work on that during that time as well. So that's generally what a week looked like. There were a few other requirements that we had during the week, and we already talked about that. And I can talk about those in this grade breakdown. So in the grade breakdown, we can see what else made up their grade. So we've talked about the worksheets when they did those. They also had practice test assignments that they did. So basically for Math 101 or for their college algebra courses, they were assigned a practice test. So this was an assignment that they should have done for Math 101. For Math 101S, we actually asked them to submit all of their handwritten work for their practice test to our Dropbox on our learning management system. This just allowed us time to look over, again, some more of their handwritten work. One struggle that we had while we were virtual was it's so hard to connect with students and see what they're writing and actually see, what mistakes that they're making as they're working out a problem. So that allowed us before a test to see a practice test and see, we really need to review how you graph a rational function. Let's look at that together and work on some of those problems and talk to some of the students about that. And we could see what problems they were having trouble with. And we could see where they were confused. We really need to go over what these vertical asymptotes are and why we find them and how they help or what they look like on the graph. What does the graph do as it approaches these vertical asymptotes? And talk to them about some of those skills that they were having trouble with. So that was another big chunk of their grade. And again, it was what we felt like wasn't a lot of extra outside work for them because they should have already done it in their college algebra course. We were just asking them to submit the work that they did and let us look at it. They also did a final exam review assignment at the end of the semester. That assignment, we let them work on in class during class time, during that last week of class, during exam review time. We basically asked them to look over old tests and rework problems from their old tests. One thing we felt like is, I mentioned we wanted to teach these students how to study. And I feel like some of them come into a college level math course and some of them have maybe hardly ever taken a cumulative final exam for a whole semester's worth of work. And so we wanted to show them what, that can be kind of daunting to a student for the first time. How can you prepare for that cumulative final exam? We provided them some exam reviews, but we also encouraged them to, you had 5 tests this semester. Let's pull up your 5 tests and rework problems from those 5 tests. Start with problems that you got incorrect and then rework some of the problems that you got correct as well. And that was the big bulk of that final exam review assignment. So that was something that they submitted right at the end of the semester and counted for 10% of their grade. The other 15% that you see up here was mainly just, did you come to the small group meetings and did you come to the worksheet meetings? And then also during small group, were you actually participating? If I said, hey, Jack, what'd you get for problem number 2 that we just worked on? Did you answer? Were you, participating then? The last thing that we used for 10% of their grade was this math lab and office hour sign-ins. And I'll tell you, this was, something that in my head I thought was a great idea. We've learned that the students didn't really like it. And so I think for fall of 2021, we're going to reapproach that. But what we encourage students to do, so as you saw, they were coming to a worksheet meeting and then they were coming to one small group meeting every week was a requirement. They were allowed to come to more small groups if they wanted. But we really wanted students to take advantage of some of the extra resources that the college offers, like Math Lab, that's just free math tutoring, or also get used to going to office hours with your professor and get to know your professor and work through problems with your professor. And even if you got a B on your test, it's important to still look over that test, maybe even with your professor, and talk about where you missed points and what happened. So we asked the students throughout the course of a semester to attend either math lab and or office hours at least 10 times. Our thought was there's 15 weeks, so 10 weeks out of the semester, just go and get some extra help on that day that you don't go to small group. Students didn't really like this because they felt like it was an extra requirement outside of class time. The incentive that we ended up giving students, which actually was one of the graduate assistants' ideas, was if you come to an extra small group meeting, we'll count that as an office hours visit. So, during this assigned class time, you can actually get that requirement done if you need to, if you're busy outside of class time. Again, I'll say that wasn't a huge success in my opinion. I think that's something that we will revisit. But here you can see the grade breakdown. And I mentioned before that our course was set up as pass-fail. And what we did is, as long as students kept at least a 70% average in college algebra support, then they got a grade of P for passing. If they fell below that 70% by the end of the semester, then they got a grade of not passing. And so we felt like that 70% wasn't too hard to achieve as long as you were attending meetings like you were supposed to. The other thing that I put here just as a resource to show you what it looked like is this is what our course calendar looked like. The first 2 weeks were a little funky, but after that, week 3, week 4, week 5, all the way down to week 15, followed the same exact schedule of you have a worksheet meeting on Monday, small groups on Wednesday and Friday, worksheet meeting on Monday, small groups on Wednesday and Friday. And over here to the side, we put some reminders for them about what they needed to do. During the first 2 weeks, we offered these student hours, and that was basically just a question and answer time for students to be able to come and get help if they needed it. The other thing is I didn't make this with a Tuesday, Thursday schedule. It's very similar, the same setup of a 50-minute meeting and then 4 small group meetings. The time is just a little different with it being just 2 days a week. But if anyone is interested in that, please shoot me a message and I'm happy to show you what it looked like for a Tuesday, Thursday class. I want to also tell you a little bit about what we were doing kind of behind the scenes. So we've talked about what we were doing with our actual class time. So behind the scenes, the graduate assistants, they were in charge of recording attendance during every class meeting. They were also in charge of, well, with me, recording those math lab and office hours visits. And this little picture here is an example of the spreadsheet that we used to record them. Basically, we just labeled all 10 visits. We wanted them to come to office hours once and to math lab once. And then we would put the date that they attended and our initials beside it to know that who recorded it and what date that student actually came and got some help. And then you can see their grade there. They were expected to go 10 times. So we just multiplied the number of visits that they went times 10. And so that was 2 things that we were recording all the time. We also kept a shared spreadsheet with the Math 101 professors or with the college algebra professors where we could talk to them about, students that we saw that were struggling or students that we noticed were coming for a lot of extra help and still something wasn't clicking, or maybe students that we weren't seeing in college algebra support. Hey, Jack has been absent for the last 3 worksheet meetings. Has he been absent as well in college algebra? I've been trying to email him, but can't get in touch with him. This was a nice way for us to communicate with the college algebra teachers while we were in this online format and we weren't actually seeing each other in the hallway or seeing each other on campus. I'm hopeful that in the fall we can maybe meet with the college algebra teachers sometimes and have just a quick little 10-minute meeting to check in with how students are doing. I think it's important for us to be in communication with the college algebra teachers because, maybe a student connects better with their college algebra teacher than they are with us. That's totally fine. And we want to support them in that and do what works best for that student. So some things that we would mention there, are students who are not doing well on their test scores. Maybe even though we're helping them a lot, something's still not going well with their test scores. One thing that we saw too, in this college algebra support class, we had a wide range of backgrounds in our students. Some students came into college algebra support and just needed this little extra push or this little extra reminder of, you should be setting aside 10 hours a week to study. Let's help you figure out exactly when you're going to study each week and create a schedule of how to study. And then they were pretty much fine and they could stick to that schedule and do really well in their class. We also saw some students who we felt like needed some really basic review, needed review on multiplying and dividing integers, or that x plus x is 2x and x times x is x squared, and things like that we felt like were very elementary, but that they didn't remember or didn't understand, and we needed to reteach them that material. When a student came in that far behind, that was another student that we would mention here in this struggling student spreadsheet and say, we're concerned because we're working with them and they're trying to solve a quadratic equation, but they don't understand that x times x is x squared and x plus x is 2x. That concept hasn't really sunk in. So we saw a wide range of that, and we tried our best to communicate with our college algebra teachers when we saw some of those students who just were really struggling and really needed that extra help, so that they could have meetings with that student as well to try to provide them as much support as we could. Some other things that we did behind the scene, the graduate assistants were in charge of doing the grading of the weekly worksheets, and they also graded the practice test as a completion grade. So as long as students did their practice test and submitted it, they got 100% on that grade. I provided all the rubrics for them to grade, and also all of the answer keys for them to post for students to have as a resource were provided from me, but the graduate assistants actually did that grading and recorded those grades for us. The other thing that we did each week was we designated a time for me and the graduate students as a whole to meet as a large group. So all of us would meet this past semester, I think it was Wednesdays at 10 a.m. And we set aside an hour that we could always meet as a group and talk about how the week was going. What were your students struggling with? That's when we got some feedback about students really aren't liking this math lab office hours requirement. So what can we do to make that better for the students? And this time I think was super helpful, not just for me as their instructor of record, and I'm planning this course and making changes for upcoming semesters, but it was also helpful for the graduate students to talk to one another and say what's going on in each of their classes. Oh, I really liked using breakout rooms this week. Have you tried it yet? And we could talk about how things worked as a whole and what was working well and what wasn't. It was also a good time for us to troubleshoot technology issues while we were online as a group, and practice sharing your screen or practice writing on your tablet and making sure that it's showing up appropriately and I can read what you're writing. We did a lot of just little things like that as a group to make sure that the graduate assistants were comfortable teaching and felt confident in what they were doing. If this is something that you were going to do or try to install at your institution, I would highly recommend, setting up that designated time each week to meet with your instructors as a whole. I think the graduate assistants really enjoyed it as well because they got to know each other a little bit more too. Some student feedback that we got. So overall, we were really happy with our student feedback. Students seemed to feel like it was a comfortable environment. I really like this comment. It feels judgment-free, that the students weren't scared to ask, wait, I thought x plus x was x squared. And they weren't scared of saying things like that, which I think is great because sometimes in a larger class, those students won't ask their question because they're embarrassed maybe of what they're going to say or scared that it might be wrong. So I was happy to see some comments like that. It was extremely helpful. I like the supportive environment, that they held extra office hours. So our graduate assistants, we really encouraged them to be available as much as they could. So they were required to host 3 hours per week of office hours. And then they also worked 3 hours per week in the math lab. So there was at least 6 hours per week, every week, that the graduate assistants were available to help students. And a lot of them, including myself, were very flexible with the students to say, if you need help outside of those timeframes, just send us a message and we'll try to schedule a time that works for you as well. One big question that we're still trying to answer is, how did it look, or did it really affect the DFW rate? So when we look, one thing that we're already thinking about is it's very hard to compare, for example, fall of 2020 to fall of 2019 or fall of 2018 or previous semesters before that, just because of all of the crazy things that went along with online learning during the pandemic. Students had extra outside personal stress in their lives that may have affected their coursework as well. So generally, just when we look at the DFW rate, we didn't see a big change overall in college algebra once we've instilled this Math 101S class. And in fact, when we look at the Math 101S students as a subset compared to students who were not in Math 101S, their DFW rate is higher. The ones that were in 101S didn't do as well as the students who were not in 101S. And that wasn't super surprising to us because we knew that students were placed in 101S for a reason. They were placed there because we expected that they wouldn't do well in college algebra. One thing that we are working on looking at is comparing this subset of students who were in Math 101S, for example, during fall of 2020, and then looking at a subset of students from fall of 2019 who would have been in 101S if the class were available, and comparing those two subset of students to see how they did. That's something that we're still working on with institutional research, our department at the College of Charleston. Once I have that data, I'm more than happy to share it. I hope that we see a positive change there, that the students did better when 101S was available. I'm also really excited for the in-person classes because I think that's going to make a big difference as well. I think that some of these students who struggled were really hard to reach. They aren't the type of students who are checking their email every day or, excited to attend a math class. So I think that when we actually are seeing them in person every day, that's going to help us a little bit more too. So what are the changes for fall of 21? So like I mentioned, all of our sections are going to be in person. We're super excited about that. So what are the changes that we're going to make? I'm planning instead to have a shorter worksheet that they do every single day that they come to college algebra support. So they'll come in, we'll have a worksheet already printed for them. They won't be responsible for printing it. The instruction's going to be shorter. So maybe on the exponent rules instruction, we're just going to look at a section of those rules. Maybe just work on the first 3 exponent rules at a time and break that exponent rules worksheet up into thirds. And they'll learn about 3 rules, do 5 to 7 practice problems on those 3 rules as a group. While they're doing that group work, the graduate assistant will be responsible to physically be moving around the classroom, checking in with each group, looking and seeing how the students are doing on those 5 to 7 problems, and do we need to work one of them together on the board, or or talk about what's going well in each group and maybe what rules they need to revisit and look at a little more and practice some more. So again, I really want those graduate assistants to just be moving around, talking to students, checking in with them. I think that again will be a lot easier to do in person than it was via Zoom. And also be sure that the students are on task. Be sure that every student actually has a pencil and is writing on their worksheet and trying to physically write out math problems. I think that's another thing that we really struggled with during the pandemic. Because we were in this online learning environment, students would think that they just opened their computer and that's all that they needed to do their math work. They a lot of times didn't have a notebook and a pencil and paper and writing out problems anymore. And so we really want to get them back in that habit of, these are the materials you need to study for a math test. You need to have some pencil and paper and be writing out problems. Reading through problems is probably not the best way to study for a math test. Instead, we want to actually see you trying these problems. So again, we'll be able to actually have our eyes on them, watching them do that and helping them through that process. So I'm thinking that worksheet and group work time will take about the first 25 to 30 minutes of class. The other thing that I like about this is we will print every worksheet for the students and they will hand it in before they leave class that day. So we will know that the students did their work during class, or they will be held accountable for doing their work during class. That's actually going to count as their attendance for that day if they turned in their worksheet or not. And then we're going to reserve the last 20 to 25 minutes here for just college algebra question and answer time. So every student will bring their laptop with them and be able to actually open up their learning management system that they use for college algebra and work on whatever skill or topic it is that they are currently working on. So every student, will be working at their own pace. But that'll be, again, time for the graduate assistants to move around the room and check and see where each student is. It also gives us a good time to say, oh, this student is kind of behind and is still back in chapter 1 material, and we need to make a note of this and reach out to their college algebra professor and start scheduling some times for this student to meet with us individually so we can help them get caught up. When we're actually seeing them doing that work and seeing their coursework open, I think that's going to be easier for us to manage as well. Another change that we're going to make, is that students will actually be taking their practice tests during our Math 101S support class time. So instead of them doing that assignment outside of class time on their own, we want to designate some time in class that they are working on that practice test and that we are there to help them. That was a thing that we tried to do online, but it was kind of hard to manage. But I think in person, we can put the students into smaller groups, let them work through problems together, and let us be moving around the room, actually helping students work through problems. As of now, we're thinking that the math lab and office hours visit is probably not going to count towards their grade at all this coming semester. That's something, again, I mentioned we're still toying with, but that was probably the biggest complaint, or it was the biggest complaint that we got during fall of 2020 and spring of 21 about our course, was that students didn't like that extra requirement of visiting the math lab and going to these 10 office hours visits. They felt like that was too much. We do plan to keep that final exam review assignment, and students will do that in class during the last week of class. And again, because we'll be in person, we're excited to be able to be more hands-on and helping them with that. So some things to think about or consider if this is something that you're interested in trying to instill in your college or start at your college. There's definitely some challenges that we saw. I mentioned that we saw students from a variety of different backgrounds. Some students that just needed a little push or a little extra help scheduling and learning how to manage a college level class. And then some students who really struggled and spent 3 weeks in chapter 1 material where they should have only been in there for 5 days. And so we had to really help those students just learn those basics, review their times tables with them. Some of them didn't remember them, and we had to help them with that. So that's one of the challenges I would mention. Obviously, too, we saw different technology backgrounds, and just resources that students had were different. Some students had an iPad and they could write on their iPad and their work was really neat, and they could even share their screen with us and show us the work that they were doing. And we felt like it was a lot easier to help that student than it was the student whose microphone was going in and out while they were trying to talk to us, or their web camera didn't really work, so we couldn't see the work that they were doing. Again, these are challenges that I'm hoping we will not be facing as much in the fall this coming semester with being in person. And then student motivation too was hard while we were online. I just think it was harder to reach students in that online environment. I think it's a lot easier for them to ignore an email than it is for them to ignore a, hey, you're here, I want to talk to you about how you're doing. Or hey, can you stay for 5 minutes after class and let me talk to you for a minute? I feel like that's harder when they're actually in the room already for them to just walk out and leave than it is to just not open your email or not respond to your email. I really liked this little visual here of that we were trying and we failed and we had to try again. And eventually we reached success with some of these students, or success in the planning that we did. Some of those worksheets that I made, I definitely had to reconfigure. Some of them were too long at the beginning, and we figured out, for that 50 minutes and for us to really be giving instruction, we need to keep those worksheets down to only 10 to 15 practice problems. Or with the office hours and math lab visits, we had to revisit some of that and figure out what worked best for the students and what they felt like was most beneficial, because this class is designed to help them. So we want to listen to their needs. One way that we did that throughout the semester is we actually sent out some anonymous surveys. We did it twice. We did it once after the first test of the semester, after their first college algebra test. We just sent out an anonymous survey to say, hey, how's it going? Can you give us some feedback? Do you like these worksheets that we're presenting to you? Are you bringing questions to small group? Is there something you think we could do better? And get some of that feedback. And then we also did it again after midterms. And the graduate assistants also really liked those anonymous surveys. It was a way for them to hear what the students are thinking without waiting till the end of semester when you have course evaluations. Like, let's make a few adjustments now to help us. Some of the feedback was even they're talking too fast and I can't understand what they're saying sometimes. So the graduate assistant knew I need to slow down and be more clear and talk so that students can understand me. The last piece of advice I would say is just believe in the work you're doing. I felt like we worked really hard and tried our best. And we know that the first time we did this, it wasn't going to be perfect. And we knew we were going to recognize changes that we needed to make. But we also knew that we were trying our best and that we were ultimately had the students' best interest in mind. So know that it won't be perfect the first time if you try this, but as long as you're doing this continuous, reflecting and thinking about what worked and what didn't work and making it changes appropriately, you're doing the best that you can. I think that's all that I had to share. Does anyone have any questions or anything they'd like to ask?
Thank you so much, Professor Hunter. We do have a few questions in the Q&A.
Okay, I can read through and answer if you want.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Perfect. Okay, so the first one I see, Irene asked, how were students selected in the co-requisite course? So great question. So we actually used a way to place students based off of their SAT math score and their high school GPA in the last class they took in high school. And just looked at a combination of those things. I actually have specific numbers. I believe the cutoff that we used was students needed to have a 480 SAT score, at least on their math, to get into 101S and 101, I'm sorry, 101 and 101S together. I can send you specific numbers if you would like to, though, but we use their SAT scores and high school GPA to place them appropriately, either into, pre-calculus or college algebra or college algebra with college algebra support. So we actually had a placement tool that we used there. Bill asked, during small groups, were the groups randomly assigned each time or did the groups stay the same? Great question. We actually left the groups the same so that a student knew, I go to Worksheet Meeting on Monday at the same time every week, and then I go to small group on Wednesday at the same time every week. And they knew that was the schedule that they stuck to. The students also knew that they were more than welcome to come to more than one small group. We also gave them flexibility as long as they emailed us and said, hey, I have a doctor's appointment this Wednesday, so can I come to small group on Friday instead? And we were okay with that. As long as they were coming once a week, we let them do that, or we let them move around. And during the spring semester, we did offer some in-person small groups. So there it was a little harder for students to move around because Wednesdays maybe we're in person and then Friday small group was online or vice versa. But it generally worked out fine where we didn't have, too many issues with students complaining about small group times. And at the beginning, I don't know if you noticed in the calendar that I showed, but at the beginning, we actually sent out a small group survey and we gave students the option of choosing days that they would prefer. Would you prefer to have small group on Wednesday or on Friday? A lot of these students, it seems like, especially during the pandemic, were taking on extra jobs or extra responsibilities at home. And, maybe on Fridays, their mother was working and they were helping taking care of their siblings. So they preferred to go to small group on Wednesdays. And we did our best to accommodate those needs. But they did stay to the same small group throughout the semester. Kim asked if they came to more than one small group meeting, did you give them extra credit? What we actually did, Kim, was give them an office hours visit. So if they came to small group more than one time, we recorded it and we counted that as attending an office hours, which counted towards 10% of their overall grade. So we felt like that was a good incentive to help them come to more than one visit. We actually had some students who came to more than one visit every week of the semester because they felt like it was helpful for them, and that was awesome, and we were happy to see that. Bill asked, how was the small group participation of 10% calculated? Good question, Bill. So what we did is during that smaller group, we required and were able to better monitor if students actually kept their camera on and were calling on when we're answering when called on. So it was really just, was your camera on? And if I said, hey, Bill, what'd you get for question number 2 that you actually turned on your microphone and answered, then we gave you a check as you were participating in small group. What we told students is they were allowed to miss up to 2 small group meetings and up to 2 worksheet meetings. And after that, we would start docking points from their small group or worksheet meeting grade. We really wanted to encourage small group because we felt like that was a time where they were going to get more individualized help. Also during the worksheet meeting, it was a lot harder for us to monitor 20 students keeping their camera on. So we didn't stress so much, Bill, turn on your camera, I can't see you, as we did in the small group where we wanted to say, hey, Bill, I want to see you. I want to see that you're working today, make sure everything's okay. We did get some students who would send us a chat and say, my webcam isn't working. And, we just had to assume that that was the truth and that they couldn't turn their camera on. And that was the reason why. So we didn't dock points. If that was the case, that we would call on them and they would answer. Diane asked, I hope that answers okay. Diane asked, is this a non-credit course? So it's a pass-fail course and it doesn't count towards, so college algebra is actually at College of Charleston is a prerequisite course. So it's not counting towards their major at all. They do get a 1 credit hour, they completed 1 credit hour on their transcript if they complete college algebra support successfully. But that grade that they get with it is either just a pass or a not pass, and it doesn't affect their GPA. So we felt like it was just a way for them to, instead of taking a prerequisite course, a whole prerequisite course, this was a nice way to give them extra support without adding a full 3 credit hours expense. But it did count for 1 credit hour. An anonymous person asked, did you assign the practice test the week of the Math 101 test or the week prior? Good question. The practice tests were actually available for Math 101 throughout the entire semester. So on the first day of class, there were 5 tests in Math 101 and then 5 practice tests that corresponded with each test. All 5 practice tests were available from the very beginning and through the whole end of the course. So they could actually take the practice test at any point in time that they felt like they were ready to do it. So it wasn't just available during the week of the test. Although I will say a lot of our students waited until the week of the test to really work on that practice test because that was when they were trying to prepare for that test. How did you decide who takes Math 101S? Is it required for some and optional for others? So yes, it is required for students who fell in this cutoff range that we designated. Again, I can pull up those specific numbers if you would like me to. I could email them to you. But we designated a specific range of SAT scores or high school GPA that we were looking at to figure out a score for students. Like we assign each student what we call a placement score to determine whether they qualified to take pre-calculus or whether they qualified to take college algebra without college algebra support, or whether they fell in this range where college algebra and college algebra support were both required. And students who did not fall in that range where it was both required, we did have some students reach out to us and say, I've always struggled with math. I've gotten placed into college algebra without the support class. Is there something I can do to get some extra help? And we would tell them that this course was available for them and they were welcome to sign up for them if they would like. Oh, this is a good question. Did you have an issue with students passing one class and failing the other? How did you handle this issue? Did students retake both if they just failed one component? So it worked out nicely for us that everyone who in our sections who ended up passing college algebra support also ended up passing college algebra. So we didn't have anyone who passed college algebra, but then failed college algebra support, which we were happy about. We felt like we tried, as long as you were attending college algebra support, there really wasn't any reason why you shouldn't pass. We did have one student who had some outside personal issues who we let be inactive in college algebra support simply because they had some things going on at home where they didn't have extra time, but they also ended up passing college algebra, and we made a special circumstance for that student to also pass college algebra support. We never had an instance of anyone failing college algebra, but then passing college algebra support. But in our syllabus, we did write that one requirement to pass college algebra support is that you also pass college algebra. So if it was the instance that someone failed college algebra, but somehow had a passing grade in the support class, we were allowed to do that. We could give that student that grade combination, an F in college algebra, but a pass in college algebra support. And basically all that would mean is in the future, they would have to retake college algebra, but they wouldn't be required to take the support class again. Because we set it up though, that the syllabus said that you had to pass college algebra to also pass college algebra support, we do have the freedom to, if they fail college algebra, they automatically did not pass college algebra support, so that when they retake the class in the future, they have to take the co-requisite course again. That's one way that we felt like we were covering our bases with, if this student was placed at the point where they needed both the co-requisite course and the college algebra course together, and they failed one and passed the other, we could automatically fail them in both. And so that they would have to take the class again with the co-requisite course. So that was just a sentence that we included in our syllabus. And I'm happy to share with you a syllabus if you would like. You can read through what we did. I actually am still working on our syllabus for in person, but our online syllabus, if anyone's planning to do this online, I'm happy to share with you, and you can see all that wording that we used. I teach in an online school only. It is totally asynchronous. Will this work for my school? Good question, Carl. I really liked the synchronous for us, so that students could get that, I have a question right now and I can get it answered. While I'm working on this worksheet, my thoughts are running through my head and I'm confused about why this exponent rule works the way it does. And so we can work through a problem right then and get help with it. I do think you could probably set up something asynchronous where everything is pre-recorded. And students, can work through problems that way in those resources, or maybe you just make extra videos for them that are available. In my personal experience, I feel like students did do better with the synchronous, just because, like I mentioned, that live question answer feedback is there for them versus just watching a video. And it is nice that they can pause and play and get through questions as they have, or rewatch problems if they need it. So I think that you could play around with setting up an asynchronous one. Again, I didn't set it up that way, but I'm happy to answer questions or bounce ideas around that you have about how you would set it up, and try to come up with a plan that would work nicely for you. I think it would probably be a lot of pre-recorded videos that students could watch, and then maybe some online, hey, we're available to answer questions tonight from 5 to 7 p.m. and sign in and be available to answer some questions for them. Corrine, what has the reaction of the college algebra professors been? Overall, our college algebra professors have been really supportive of us. They like that we're providing their students extra support. They like that we are communicating with them and reaching out to their students. And, a lot of the college algebra classes are really large. And so, in fact, some of them are double sections with 60 students in them. And while we were online, it's a lot harder to connect with all 60 of your students during that 50-minute meeting. And so the college algebra teachers were really excited that, these students who we've identified as students who are probably going to have a harder time in their math course are getting that more individualized help that maybe they can't give them in this large online class. And so I would say they've been supportive of it. They, actually have had some students too that will reach out to them and say, hey, my friend is in college algebra support and it's getting this extra help. Can I sign up for that too? And so we had some students who heard about it and thought it was a neat idea and would reach out to their college algebra professor. And then, we could get them into a class and let them get some help too, which we thought was really neat. Irene, seems like some of the students in the co-requisite class are really varied. Why do some formative assessment and move between the weak student don't know the difference into a prerequisite course? So yeah, so Irene's mentioning the idea of why we are getting this variance of students with their backgrounds of, some students just needed a little extra push, like I was mentioning, and then some students were really confused about, the idea of x times x is x squared. I think part of that is that we were in this online environment and maybe some students were able to, get some type of extra help when they were doing their placement test or something of that nature that allowed them to maybe look like they would have been placed where they shouldn't have. We also, again, this was our first time running this past school year. So we are still, the scores that we use to place students, we weren't positive that they were right. Maybe we need to raise the bar a little bit, even for our co-requisite course. That's something that we've been working on this summer as well with institutional research is the, placement scores that we've used to put students into classes, is it appropriate? Are they actually getting placed where they need to be? And it sounds like we are going to have some students who, figure out ways to do well on a placement test that places them into a class that they shouldn't be in. I think that while we are in that online learning world, we saw some of that. And hopefully when we're back in person some more, we're hopeful that some of that will go away. Also, were the students who didn't place into the co-requisite course that the algebra professors later identified as struggling in their classes? What did you do with those students? Good question. Okay, so she's asking, so there's students who in their college algebra course, we identified as struggling, but they weren't in the co-requisite course from the beginning. So if it was the first week or so, like we mentioned, some students would reach out and say, I've really struggled with high school math classes. I'm worried about taking this online math class. We would tell them, hey, college algebra support is available for you. If you want to sign up, there's still some seats in this section and we'd love to have you. And so they were able to sign up. We did have one student during the spring semester, maybe two, who late enrolled in college algebra support as well. And we let them do that if they felt like it would help them. There were some students that we identified as struggling that we reached out to and told them about the class during that first, week or so. And they didn't take us up on the offer and didn't want to sign up for it and chose to stay in college algebra without taking the support that was offered to them. And that we felt like was their choice. If they didn't fall in that range of you're required to take college algebra support, then we didn't force them to sign up for it. We just told them about it and let them know. And in fact, now that I'm thinking about it, during the first week of class, all college algebra professors sent out an email letting all college algebra students know that they could sign up for college algebra support if it was something that they were interested in. And we got a few who were not required to do it. David asked, what high school GPA did you use for placement? David, I would have to go back and look some of that stuff up. So I actually more was working on the actual setup of the course, and I didn't do a lot of the placing students where they needed to be. But I could look that up for you and get it back to you. I just, got these students who were in college algebra support and designed the course for them based off of, students that were already there. So I didn't do necessarily work on the team that placed everybody, but I'm happy to look that up for you and get it back to you. Are there other college level math courses with co-req courses? So Carolyn, at the College of Charleston, this is our first class that actually has this co-requisite support tied along with it. I think there are a lot of classes that could benefit from it. I think pre-calculus is another class at the college that students generally struggle with. It's a lot of material and it moves really quickly. And I think the co-requisite model could work well for some students. At this time, though, we've just set it up with our college algebra courses simply because we had students coming in underprepared and we didn't have a lower level course to offer them. So we set up this instead. I think that's it. Anyone else have any questions?
Well, yeah, I think we are just about out of time. Thank you so much, Professor Hunter. I think this was a really wonderful presentation, a lot of great questions. And thank you all so much for attending. If you or any of your other instructors are interested in presenting for our Learning and Growing webinar series, you can submit your proposals to us, and I'll paste that link in the chat here if you are interested. So let me go ahead and do that. And if you have any questions, please direct them to us at marketing@hawkslearning.com, and we will be emailing you a link to view the recording of this webinar once it is available. But thank you all so much again, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.